Have you ever really stopped and wondered why you picked one brand of coffee over another, or what was really going on in your head during your last big purchase? Well, today we're diving into the hidden blueprint inside our brains, the one that dictates pretty much all of these choices, and most of the time, we don't even have a clue it's happening.
I mean, think about it for a second. Your favorite sneakers, that soda you just grabbed from the fridge, the car you dream of driving. You could probably give me a whole list of perfectly logical reasons for why you chose them. But what if I told you that all that conscious reasoning was just a tiny, tiny part of the actual story?
Because, get this, according to a massive amount of research, the vast majority of our purchasing decisions, a staggering 95%, are made subconsciously. Yeah, you heard that right. Almost all the time, our choices are on complete autopilot, guided by feelings and gut reactions we aren't even aware of.
So how on earth do you tap into that hidden 95%? Well, that is exactly where neuromarketing comes in. It's this incredible field that smashes brain science and marketing together to get a totally unfiltered look at what truly makes us tick. It goes way beyond what we say we want to what our brains actually crave.
Okay, so if so much of what drives us is buried deep in our subconscious, how could anyone possibly see what's going on in there? Now, it's not exactly mind reading, but you're going to see that the technology is getting unbelievably close.
And this really gets to the core problem that neuromarketing was built to solve. For decades, companies just use surveys. The issue? We humans want to look good. We often give the correct or the socially acceptable answer, not always the honest one.
So how do they pull this off? Let's take a quick peek inside the toolkit. They use things like fMRI machines to see which parts of the brain literally light up with desire. They use EEG headsets to capture our split-second emotional jolt from seeing a logo or hearing a jingle. And they use eye tracking to know exactly what grabs our attention in an ad down to the pixel.
Here's a great way to think about it. You can ask a driver how the car feels, and they'll give you their best guess. Or you could plug directly into the engine's data sensors and know for a fact. Neuromarketing is all about getting that hard, raw data straight from the engine of our decision-making, the brain itself.
All right, so we know how researchers can measure all these subconscious reactions. But this is where it gets really cool. Why do they even happen? To figure that out, we need to look at the part of our brain that's basically running the show on emotional autopilot.
The star player here is called the limbic system. This is the ancient, super powerful part of our brain that handles all the core emotions. Fear, pleasure, you name it. It's the engine of our gut feelings, and it often makes a decision long before our logical, rational mind even gets a chance to weigh the pros and cons.
And this isn't just some abstract theory. With an fMRI, a scientist can literally watch the brain's reward center, a little spot called the nucleus accumbens, light up like a Christmas tree when you see a product you really, truly want. It's a direct, biological flare of pleasure, and it's an incredibly powerful predictor of what you'll do next.
This analogy just nails it. Our conscious mind is the captain on the bridge, thinking it's in total control, steering the ship. But deep below the surface, the limbic system is the autopilot, constantly making tiny course corrections based on these deep, invisible currents of emotion and pure instinct.
But, with this incredible power to see inside our heads comes some really, really big questions. Where's the line between persuading someone and, manipulating them? That's the ethical tightrope we need to talk about next. The core issues here are pretty profound. If companies can read our unfiltered brain signals, who owns that data? Is it fair for them to target our deepest biological triggers for status, or fear, or the need to belong? And at what point does this technology threaten our ability to make a free, rational choice for ourselves?
Here's another way to frame that ethical problem. Traditional marketing, it knocks on your front door and tries to persuade you to let it in. Neuromarketing is like finding the building's hidden schematics, going around back to the circuit breaker and just flipping on all the lights yourself. It's incredibly effective, but it definitely raises some unsettling questions about control.
So, what's next on the horizon? Well, this technology is not staying cooped up in a lab. As we're about to see, it's evolving, and it's starting to become a part of our everyday lives. You see, what started out with these bulky, super expensive machines and sterile, controlled labs is going through a huge change. The future is wearable sensors. Think smartwatches, biometric headbands, all paired with powerful AI that can analyze our brain's reactions in real time while we're just out there living our lives. And the implications of this shift from the lab to real life are just staggering. Wearable tech and AI mean that the decoding of our subconscious is about to get faster, more constant, and more deeply woven into the world around us than we can probably even imagine right now. And this all leads us to one final, absolutely crucial question. As that line between marketing and neuroscience basically disappears, and technology gets the power to read our subconscious feelings on the fly, who's ultimately responsible for how that power gets used? The companies? Us, the consumers? The government? That's a question we're all going to have to answer, and probably sooner than we think.
Hey there. We're surrounded by ads all day, every day. But have you ever stopped to think about why some of them just vanish from your memory, while others seem to stick with you forever? Today, we're going to dig into the science of why emotional stories are pretty much the most powerful tool an advertiser has. So, let's start with a question I think we can all relate to. Seriously, think about it. You can probably still hum the jingle from a soda ad you saw 10 years ago, but what did you have for lunch yesterday? Total blank, right? And that's not because your memory is bad. It's actually a huge clue about how our brains work and how they're wired to prioritize feelings over facts. To really get to the bottom of this, you gotta understand that advertisers basically have two main playbooks for getting our attention. They can either talk to our logical, rational brain, or they can go a totally different route and tap into the world of our emotions. And these two playbooks create two very different paths. The path of logic, well, that one appeals to your rational mind. It gives you the what, the features, the specs, the price, and it asks you to think. But the path of emotion, that's different. It targets all those subconscious things that make us tick. It focuses on the why behind a brand, and it just asks you to feel. All right, let's break down that logical ad first. The best way to think about it is like a map. It just gives you the facts, plain and simple. It's all about product features, the price, and here are all the logical reasons why our product is better. It's direct, it's informative, and it really requires you to sit there and consciously think about what they're telling you. But on the other side, you've got the emotional ad. And this isn't a map, it's a story. The focus suddenly shifts away from the product and onto things we all get, friendship, happiness, that feeling of connection. The product itself is often kind of in the background, just a small piece of a bigger story. Okay, so this all sounds great in theory, right? A nice story versus a boring list of facts. But is there any proof this actually works? Well, yeah. And that's where things get really interesting with something called neuromarketing. We can literally peek inside our brains to see what's going on. Scientists can use these incredible tools, like EEG, which basically measure the electrical buzz happening in your brain. They can watch in real time how you react to different ads. And the results? Whoa, they are not subtle at all. There is a huge, measurable difference. And here is the big reveal. When we watch a logical, just the facts kind of ad, yeah, our brain shows a little bit of activity, sure. But when we watch an ad that tells a story, that has some emotion, our brain just lights up. The parts of our brain tied to emotion, to memory, they go into overdrive. The bottom line is, stories literally force our brains to pay way more attention. And look, this brain scan stuff, it's really just confirming what psychologists have been telling us for decades. We all love to think of ourselves as these super rational creatures who make decisions based on spreadsheets and data. But the science is clear. Most of our choices, especially what we buy, are driven by our feelings, by our gut, not by a logical checklist. All right, so our brands are totally wired for stories. We get it. But why? What's the secret sauce here? What are the psychological tricks that make this connection so incredibly powerful? Let's unlock that why. First up, there's this thing called associative learning. It sounds kind of technical, but it's super simple. When an ad makes you feel happy or like you belong, your brain doesn't just feel it and move on. It subconsciously creates this little invisible tag, connecting that awesome feeling right back to the brand. Then you've got something called reward activation. A good story literally feels like a reward to our brains. It tickles the same pleasure centers as, eating a great meal or laughing with a friend. And that good feeling, it gets splashed right onto the brand, making us like it more without us even being aware of it. And when advertisers are smart, they do this again and again and again. And that leads to what's called emotional conditioning. It's kind of like Pavlov's dogs, right? You hear the bell, you start to drool. You see the brand, and you start to get that warm, fuzzy feeling. It's a deliberate process of building a positive reflex. So here's how it works, broken down into 4 easy steps. Step 1, you see a touching ad. Step 2, you feel something real,
joy, a sense of connection, whatever it is. Step 3, without even thinking about it, your brain forges a link between that feeling and the brand. And step 4, later on when you see that brand in a store, you're already more open to it. You've already got a good feeling about it.
And get this whole emotional thing isn't just about how you feel right then and there. It fundamentally changes how you remember these brands for the long haul. So you've got to understand there are two types of memory at play. Logical ads, they target your explicit memory, the facts. You might remember the price for a day, maybe a week, but it fades, and it fades fast. Emotional ads, though, they're going for your implicit memory, that gut feeling. It's the subconscious stuff, trust, joy, and that can stick with you for years, long after you've forgotten all the details. So why does it last so long? Well, because that feeling, that emotional punch, acts like super glue for your memory. It helps encode the brand, basically moving it from your brain's temporary folder into its long-term storage. The story is the vehicle that gets it there. Okay, we've gone through the science, the psychology, the memory hacks. So what's the big takeaway from all of this? Well, it all boils down to one really simple and powerful idea. I want you to really let this sink in. A logical ad is a map. It's useful, it gives you directions and data, but it's just a piece of paper. An emotional story, that's a bridge. It doesn't just tell you where to go, it creates the connection that actually carries you to the destination. And that's the core difference, isn't it? One gives you information, the other gives you an experience. One talks to your brain, but the other one talks to your heart. And as we've seen, the heart usually gets the final say. So I'll leave you with this question. The next time you're watching TV or scrolling online and an ad comes on, just stop for a second. Really look at it. Ask yourself, are they handing me a map full of facts and figures? Or are they trying to build a bridge to connect with me through a story? Because now you know exactly what to look for.
We are absolutely surrounded by brands, right? But have you ever really stopped and wondered why you feel a certain way about them? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain and look at the hidden architecture of those feelings, the psychology that quietly shapes what you decide to buy every single day. I mean, really think about it. Why do you reach for one brand of coffee over another, even if you can't really explain why? What makes you just know that a certain car is reliable or that a tech company is cool and innovative? It feels like a gut instinct, doesn't it? But here's the thing. It's not a gut instinct. It's by design.
You see, the whole secret comes down to the two ways our brains store information. First, you've got explicit memory. This is for the hard facts. You know, the product specs, the price, the claims in an ad. It's all conscious, it's logical, and honestly, it's pretty easy to forget. But then there's implicit memory. And this is where the magic happens. This isn't about facts at all, it's about feelings. It's that sense of trust, that little flash of joy, that intuitive vibe that sticks around long after all the details have faded away. And that is what brands are really chasing.
So this lasting feeling, it isn't just some vague idea. Nope, it's got a specific name, and it is the #1 target for pretty much every successful brand on the planet.
It's called implicit brand memory. And a good way to think about it is like an invisible architecture that brands are building inside your mind. It's a deep, subconscious association that totally bypasses your rational, logical thinking. This is exactly why a brand can just feel right, even when you can't remember a single fact about its products.
So how in the world do they build this architecture? Well, it turns out there's a psychological toolkit, a set of 5 key principles that marketers use to carefully construct that brand vibe right in our implicit memory. So let's open up the toolkit and break them down.
Okay, first tool in the kit. This is the foundation for everything else, and it's called associative learning. It's all about making powerful connections without you even realizing it.
So what brands do is they basically piggyback on emotions that you already have. Just think about Coca-Cola. How often do they actually talk about the taste of their soda? Almost never, right? Instead, they show you these images of friendship, family, celebrations. Your brain then subconsciously links the brand to those good feelings you already understand. It's a really subtle but incredibly powerful transfer of emotion.
The second tool takes this whole idea a step further. So don't think of it as just one link. Think of it more like training for your brain. This is called emotional conditioning. So if associative learning is like the first date, emotional conditioning is the long-term relationship. Through repeated exposure, again and again, our brains are literally trained to have a positive reaction. The classic example is Nike.
For decades, they've paired that swoosh logo with incredible stories of overcoming challenges and achieving greatness. And over time, you don't even need the story anymore.
All right, the third technique is all about timing. It's about setting the perfect emotional stage for their message. It's known as effective priming.
And what's so fascinating about priming is that it works before you even see the product. You know, a commercial might start with this heartwarming story about a family reunion. Well, that story puts you in a positive emotional state. It primes your mind. So by the time the brand logo finally shows up, your brain is already open, it's receptive, and it's ready to connect that good feeling. The fourth key, now this is a big one. It shows us that emotion isn't just about feeling good, it's a memory supercharger. This is called enhanced memory encoding.
The research on this is totally clear. When we are emotionally engaged in something, our brains work harder to store that information. The emotional stuff acts like a highlighter for our memory, making the whole experience way more vivid and much more likely to get filed away in our long-term memory banks.
And hey, this isn't just a theory, it's biology. You can literally see it. Studies show that ads based on emotional stories generate way more neural activity in our memory centers than ads that just focus on logic or price. Our brains literally light up for good story. And that is exactly why you might forget the price of a product from an ad you saw last week, but you'll never forget how it made you feel.
And finally, we've got the most primal principle of them all. This one connects those brand feelings directly to our brain's pleasure centers.
So when a brand story makes us feel good, it can actually activate the reward centers in our brain. Yep, the same parts that respond to amazing food or music or getting a hug. This creates a powerful link between the brand's memory and an actual biological sensation of pleasure. It creates this subconscious drive to seek it out again. And at that point, it stops feeling like a choice and it starts feeling more like an instinct.
Okay, so we've got all these tools. How does it all come together? Well, there's one simple but really powerful analogy that just perfectly captures how brands build these feelings.
Just think about that for a second. It's so true. You might not remember the exact recipe or the measurements or even the last time you had that meal. That's all the explicit data, the facts. But that scent, that aroma can instantly transport you, just flooding you with a feeling of warmth and comfort and home. That's the implicit memory.
So, the crucial point, the big takeaway, is this. The best brands aren't trying to get you to memorize their recipe of facts and figures. No, they are creating an emotional scent, a powerful, invisible association that anchors their brand to your deepest, most positive feelings. And that brings us to one last thought. The next time you find yourself in a store, reaching for a particular product on a shelf, just pause for a second. Ask yourself, am I really making a conscious, rational choice right now? Or am I just following a feeling that was very carefully designed to feel like my own?